Welcome to the alternate sports planet, where an alternate decision creates an alternate reality. We'll take a detailed look, season by season, on how players' legacies and teams' fortunes could have been different up to the present day. And yeah, no one could ever know for sure exactly what would have happened, but this is just my opinion of one scenario based on information we do have. A universe of the ultimate what if and what could have been. In this first journey, we go to a planet in which Tim Duncan, number one overall pick in 97-98 Rookie of the Year, two-time All-Star, brought the San Antonio Spurs their first ever NBA championship in 99, decides to leave the San Antonio Spurs and sign with the Orlando Magic. Tim Duncan, an unrestricted free agent, had narrowed his decision down to two choices: either stay with the Spurs, which he has had 3 successful seasons, including a title in 99, developed a father-son-like relationship with head coach Greg Popovich, or sign with the Orlando Magic, who under Coach of the Year Doc Rivers created enough cap space to sign up to 3 max contracts. Orlando had already secured sign and trade agreements to acquire superstar Grant Hill and rising star Tracy McGrady. The opportunity to be in Florida and be a part of a young nucleus in their prime for years to come was too good to pass up, and Tim Duncan would sign a 3-year max deal with the Orlando Magic. Orlando's new Big Three would be expected to dominate the league, and Tim Duncan wasted no time establishing himself as the best big man in the East. Although Grant Hill would carry his misdiagnosed ankle injury over from the previous season, and after only just 4 games, he will be shut down for the rest of the season. This would give some doubt on how good Orlando could really be if Tim Duncan had to carry the load by himself. But Orlando would discover they had more than just a perimeter athlete in Tracy McGrady. McGrady would fill the void as a secondary scoring option, increasing his scoring average up to 22 points a game, 7 points up from the previous season. He showed the ability to score consistently anywhere on the floor, inside or outside, turning into a superstar overnight. Orlando would take the league by storm. Duncan and McGrady would essentially become the Eastern Conference version of Shaq and Kobe. The duo would be all-star starters. 5th overall pick Mike Miller would win Rookie of the Year. McGrady would win Most Improved Player. And Tim Duncan would win his first MVP, averaging 24 points a game, 12 rebounds per game, and 2.5 blocks per game. Orlando would cruise through the Eastern Conference and earn the number 1 overall seed with 62 wins. They would have high expectations going into the playoffs. As expected, the Eastern Conference provided no path of resistance to Orlando on their way to the finals. Duncan and McGrady would be unstoppable as they would sweep their opponents through the first 2 rounds and would only suffer 1 loss to the Philadelphia 76ers before eliminating them in 5. Although the same way Orlando ran through the East, the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers were doing the exact same thing in the West. The finals that everyone anticipated from the beginning of the season was here, featuring the clear best 2 teams in the league, the Los Angeles Lakers and the Orlando Magic. Orlando would appear to be ready for the challenge, taking Game 1 at home, but things would drastically turn as the dominance of Shaquille O'Neal and the brilliance of Kobe Bryant would be too much for anyone on Orlando to deal with, and Tim Duncan would be neutralized. The Los Angeles Lakers would easily win games 2, 3, 4, and 5 to win back-to-back championships. Despite the disappointing finals, there was still enough excitement and optimism going into the summer, as Tracy McGrady could only get better, and maybe Grant Hill could finally be healthy, and they focused on reinforcements to deal with Shaquille O'Neal, signing veterans Patrick Ewing and Horace Grant. Orlando knew they were still by far the best team in the East, despite the fact that after only 14 games, Grant Hill would suffer more injury setbacks and have to miss the rest of the season again. But Tim Duncan picked up right where he left off, continuing to show he was the best big man in the East. And McGrady also continued to showcase his improvement, now fully comfortable in his role as a second superstar, increasing his scoring average to 24 points a game. Tim Duncan was the best version of himself this year, virtually unstoppable on the block and a force on the glass and defensively. The Duncan-McGrady duo would be all-star starters once again, and Tim Duncan would win back-to-back league MVPs. Orlando dominated the East again with 64 wins, and once again earning the #1 overall seed. For Orlando, the playoffs were only about one thing: getting a rematch with the Lakers in the finals. They knew that their Eastern Conference opponents were merely just stepping stones, as they would breeze through the first 3 rounds to get to the much anticipated rematch. But this rematch will be disappointing yet again, as Orlando had no answers for Shaq and Kobe raising their games to another level, and would get crushed in games 1 and 2 at home. The Lakers had an unfocused night, and Orlando snuck out a Game 3 victory. And even though Duncan played better overall in this series, he had very little help. And the refocused Lakers squad would take games 4 and 5, winning their 3rd championship in a row. Being dominated by the Lakers twice in the finals would naturally cause some tension and doubt throughout the organization, notably between head coach Doc Rivers and general manager John Gabriel. Doc Rivers felt he needed better big men to contest with Shaq. Gabriel wanted to go a different direction, go smaller and more versatile. This somehow resulted in the signing of veteran Shawn Kemp and later trading Mike Miller for Drew Gooden. This season, the focus would be intense. The feeling around the team was championship or bust. The desire for the team to play a bit faster meant Tracy McGrady would take his game to another level, especially once they knew Grant Hill would be done for the season yet again after only 29 games. Tracy McGrady would end up averaging 28 points per game, second only behind Kobe Bryant. This style allowed the supporting cast to be more balanced and contribute better overall, although Shawn Kemp didn't work out so well. Tim Duncan would have no issues deferring some, but he was still the unquestioned focal point of the team and the anchor in the paint. Duncan was still unstoppable on the block and could score at will and anchored the team defensively as usual. McGrady made a strong case for MVP this season and maybe should have won it, but Tim Duncan was named to his 3rd straight MVP, something only achieved by Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and Larry Bird, averaging 23 points a game, 13 rebounds a game, and 3 blocks per game. Orlando would win 65 games and once again earn the #1 overall seed. Locked in and focused, Orlando was ready. Once again, they had little issues moving through the first 2 rounds and eliminated the New Jersey Nets in 6 games. The trilogy was on. Lakers versus Magic, Part 3, and this time Orlando felt it would be different. And it was. Orlando would be much more physical with Shaq, and Tim Duncan would carry his team to a dominant Game 1 victory. But the Lakers behind Kobe Bryant would take Game 2. Orlando's total team effort would overcome the Lakers in Game 3, but the Lakers' adjustments and veteran savvy would win Game 4. Duncan and McGrady would will their team to a Game 5 victory, leaving Tracy McGrady compelled to say that it finally feels good to be on the right side of history this time. This would only fuel the Lakers as they would tighten up defensively and hit big shots when it mattered to steal Game 6. Game 7 would be close, but Orlando would unravel in crucial moments, turning the ball over, missing shots, and the Lakers would close out the Magic to win their 4th straight championship, which no team had done since the Boston Celtics of the 1960s. Tim Duncan had legitimate concerns about the front office issues and the ability to win a championship with his franchise, but he was just ready to be rewarded and was comfortable enough to sign a 7-year max deal to keep him in Orlando for essentially the rest of his prime. Grant Hill would develop a staph infection after another ankle surgery that would nearly cost him his life, so he would end up starting and finishing the upcoming season on injury reserve to take time to recover. GM John Gabriel, for some reason, would tout Juwan Howard as a major free agent pickup. With tensions boiling over through the summer and expectations still high, Orlando struggled to start the season. Chemistry seemed to be off, and after a 3-8 start, Orlando would send shockwaves throughout the league by firing head coach Doc Rivers. Bench coach Johnny Davis would be named the interim coach, and it would take a few games to regroup, but the consistency of Tim Duncan would get the team back on track. Duncan would continue to be a dominating force, averaging 22 points a game, 12 rebounds per game, and 2.7 blocks per game. Tracy McGrady would continue to be one of the best scorers in the league, actually winning the league's scoring title, averaging 27 points per game. This year, though, other Eastern Conference contenders began to develop, such as the Indiana Pacers, who actually earned the best record in the East this year. Orlando would still earn the 2nd seed in the East. Duncan and Tracy McGrady still expected to make another finals run. One of those contenders they would meet in the 2nd round, the Detroit Pistons, who hired famed coach Larry Brown and acquired all-star Rasheed Wallace before the trade deadline. Detroit was a team built on defense, anchored by 2-time Defensive Player of the Year Ben Wallace, and they would clamp down on Orlando to take Game 1. Orlando would bounce back to win Game 2, but then Detroit would turn up the pressure at home, with Tayshaun Prince bothering Tracy McGrady and the Wallaces controlling the interior. Detroit would win Games 3 and 4. Orlando would have some fight left, with McGrady able to break free for a bit and win both Games 5 and 6. But in another close Game 7, Orlando just wouldn't be able to hit big shots when they needed to, and Detroit would advance, sending the Magic home early for the first time in the Duncan era. Detroit would advance to the finals and pull off the major upset of defeating the 4-time defending champion Los Angeles Lakers to win their first title since 1990. This summer would be filled with trade rumors, where any player was up for discussion except for Tim Duncan. Through the end of it, though, they decided to retain coach Johnny Davis and keep the nucleus of the roster intact. And they would add a young, versatile forward with a lot of upside, Hedo Turkoglu. Grant Hill recovered and was finally healthy enough to start the season. This brought a new level of optimism on the road back to the finals. This would be the first season that the Big Three would play together for the majority of a season. While Tim Duncan's scoring dipped a bit, deferring and adjusting, Orlando's game plan still always flowed through Tim. He would still be dominant offensively and defensively, averaging 20 points a game, 11 rebounds per game, and 2.6 blocks per game. Tracy McGrady would be mostly unfazed by the trade rumors and continue to play to his capabilities, averaging 23 points a game. Grant Hill played more of a facilitator role, still averaged 16 points a game and 6 assists per game. The Big Three would all be all-stars together for the first time as well, but Orlando would go through a slump. Part of it was fatigue and on-court chemistry, and a part of it was Johnny Davis not completely having the group's attention. But they would find a way to get it together towards the end of the season, and they would be prepared enough for another playoff run. Orlando would finish the season with 52 wins and earn the 4th seed in the East, the lowest seed to date in the Duncan era, which would cast some doubt on how far they could advance. And the main reason for this doubt would be their second round opponent, the Miami Heat, who traded for Shaquille O'Neal over the past summer. Shaq would still be a nightmare matchup for Orlando, and Miami would crush them in Game 1 and pull out a close win in Game 2. Orlando would adjust, collapsing down on Shaquille O'Neal and making others try to beat them, while Duncan and McGrady would come alive to win Games 3 and 4. A young Dwayne Wade would step up and take over, making huge impact plays all over the floor, offensively and defensively. Miami would cruise in Game 5 and end Orlando's season in a close Game 6. Miami would lose to Detroit in 7 games to set up a unique finals matchup between the defensive juggernaut defending champion Detroit Pistons and the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns featuring league MVP Steve Nash. This clash of opposite styles would go back and forth through all 7 games, but in the end, Detroit would be able to make big plays and lock down when it counted, and the Detroit Pistons would become back-to-back champions. General Manager John Gabriel would step down, and Orlando hired new General Manager Otis Smith, who wanted an emphasis on developing the younger players, and he also let go of Johnny Davis and hired Brian Hill to be the team's new head coach, who coached the Orlando Magic during the Shaq and Penny era. The thought was, who better to coach against Shaq than someone who coached him for 4 seasons during their early glory years. The excitement for the upcoming season was quickly tempered, as Grant Hill suffered more injury setbacks and started the season on injured reserve. Hill would play for short stretches throughout the season before finally being shut down later in March. Orlando came out struggling, not only with adapting to Brian Hill's system, but also incorporating the younger talent and new rotational players. Tim Duncan would have to carry much more of the load from a leadership standpoint while remaining the focal point of the offense. Although Tim played well, he would soon learn that he would have to play through plantar fasciitis, a foot injury that would affect him on both ends of the floor. His numbers dipped down to 18 points per game, 11 rebounds per game, and 2 blocks per game. Tracy McGrady would also begin to have nagging back spasms that would slow him down at times during the season as well. McGrady was still leading the team in scoring though at 24 points per game, feeling as if he had to carry more of the weight. Surprisingly, Orlando was barely holding on to the 8th seed at the All-Star break. Shortly after, McGrady would suffer a back injury in which he was carried off the court and would have to miss the rest of the season. Orlando would continue to slump, and with the team falling far enough outside the playoff race and not feeling good about their chances if they did somehow get in, decided to shut Tim Duncan down in late March as well. Orlando finished their season with a disappointing 36 wins and completely out of the playoffs for the first time since 2000. The Miami Heat would go on to defeat the Dallas Mavericks in the finals in 6 games. Tim having to watch Shaq raise his 5th championship trophy in 7 seasons. That wraps up part 1 of this journey. In part 2, we'll see if Tim Duncan and the Orlando Magic are able to bounce back, or has the championship window completely closed. Does Tim Duncan even finish his career in Orlando? Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Subscribe to this channel to eventually see more content like this and other different things as well. Appreciate y'all for tuning in to the Alternate Sports Planet. See y'all soon.